Welcome to the very first Sussex, Ontario election show. I'm Joe Ragusa. I'll be hosting the show today, and with me is Brian Zeiler-Kligman, who's a senior associate here at Sussex in our Ontario Government Relations Group. So we're coming to you live from our offices in downtown Toronto. We've decided to take a little bit of a risk. The risk is when you go live, you don't have the opportunity to go back and edit your mistakes. What's better about this format is that we can bring you up-to-the-minute developments. Had we taped it yesterday, we wouldn't be able to talk about the PC Leaders debate and some of the developments that have happened just this morning. So why are we doing this? We thought we'd give our clients and our associates and our friends, rather than written updates as to what is transpiring in the world of Ontario government, Ontario politics, the Ontario election cycle that we're now firmly in. Yeah, we thought we would do this live and give people a reason to possibly eat lunch at your desk, because the show will only be shown on the internet, and you've got to be near a computer or maybe your phone to watch us talk about what we're going to talk about. So we will, over the weeks to come, have guests that will include people from the various political parties. We will have pollsters here that will talk to you about their work, perhaps a subject matter expert or two in the policy discussion, and people that generally have something to contribute in terms of what's happening in the world of Ontario government, politics, and the Ontario election. So Brian, for those people who may not have had the opportunity to meet you yet, maybe you could just take a minute to tell them a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So I'm Brian Zeiler-Kligman. I've actually joined Sussex back in July of 2017, and prior to that, I had spent well over a decade at the intersection of business and government. So I've worked previously for business associations as well as industry associations, trying to make sure that both business and government understood their respective priorities and how those could come together to successfully create effective policy for both. I'm a lawyer by background, so although reformed at this point, not practicing, but clearly the regulatory framework is a sweet spot and able to help clients navigate through the minutia of regulation as well as through the regulatory process as a result.
Okay, great, thanks. And having Brian here has been a huge addition to our team. I believe that lawyers conspire to write legislation and regulations in such a way that only other lawyers can understand them. So having someone here to help us and our clients decipher and translate that kind of work has been very invaluable. So Brian and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about sort of where we're at in terms of the Ontario election cycle, in terms of the legislative calendar, the political calendar. Obviously, we can't have a show like this at this time without talking about the Ontario PC leadership. That is very, very live, today being a significant milestone date in that leadership process. And we'll talk a little bit about the most recent polling that has come out this week on this whole question. So why don't we just get into it? And again, this is for the benefit of our clients, our associates, our affiliates, and we actually would welcome the opportunity to have feedback from you as to the sort of topics that you would like us to talk about in future, guests that you would like to watch and listen to here in our studio. And so please contact one of us, and we'll try our best to make that happen. So here we are. It's February 16th. We are our heads are spinning in terms of what's going on in Ontario politics. Just by way of the calendar, to give some context, on Tuesday, Monday being the Family Day holiday, thank you Dalton McGuinty for giving us a long weekend in February, the legislature will come back after the Christmas and winter break. Now, when the legislature rose back in December, we had three parties, we had three leaders in place. We kind of knew who was going to lead their respective parties into the coming budget cycle and election.
Oh, and even with the end-of-year interviews, we even had basically the narratives that were starting to form for the election campaign already becoming clear as well.
Exactly. So today is the last day for PC leadership candidates to put in their names, their papers, and their $125,000.
And also the last day for people to sign up as members of the PC party to be eligible to vote in that leadership campaign.
So that's today, and we have a field of candidates, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but Tuesday the legislature comes back. We will have in the chair that is occupied by the leader of the opposition. It won't be Patrick Brown, it will be Vic Fedeli. Patrick Brown, of course, resigned from the leadership on January the 25th. There was a little bit of back and forth in the last day as to whether or not he actually resigned, but let's take it that, in fact, Vic Fedeli is the interim leader. That's the PC party constitution allows the caucus to appoint an interim leader when a leader resigns. So Fedeli will be, and Vic Fedeli, who is known to most of you from Nipissing, former mayor of North Bay, he'll be in the leader of the opposition's chair. While he is in there holding the government to account, as of a few minutes ago, Patrick Brown has been expelled.
That's right. He's been. There was a statement released just a few moments ago by Vic Fedeli's office that Patrick Brown is no longer a member of the PC caucus.
Right. So under our system, when someone is elected by their constituents, by their voters in their ridings, they hold the seat, and a party leader cannot take that away from them once the people have made that decision. So Brown is an MPP. As of a few minutes ago, he is an independent MPP, having...
The second in the legislature.
So there you go. Having been expelled from the PC caucus by the interim leader. So looking forward, we will have the PC leadership process will culminate on March the 10th. There is a voting period from, I believe, March 2nd to March the 8th, which is online voting, and on March the 10th they will have an event and they will announce who the winner of the PC leadership process is. Back to the legislature. At some point in this session, we will have a provincial budget tabled, and to us and to many of our clients, the provincial budget is the most important day of the year, because not only does the government indicate what it will spend money on, but it also indicate where that money will come from, and it's the biggest policy statement of the government's priorities of the year. Mm-hmm. So we'll have that. We're thinking, it hasn't been announced yet, end of March, early April. There's some speculation, Brian, that first of all, I think it's reasonable to expect that the contents of the budget will form the basis of the Liberal platform.
I think that's fairly safe.
But I think we also expect an actual Liberal platform document to be tabled at some point.
Yeah, I think our expectations, and I think the general expectations are, as you indicated, that the budget would be not necessarily something that actually is hoping to be passed so much as presented, and that in that it will be something that the Liberals can campaign on. Right. So there will be some goodies in there that they can campaign on as they elect us, and we'll make sure that this gets passed. But that in addition to it, there will be a fulsome platform document.
Well, we expect that, and so there is some speculation about whether or not the Liberals will actually pass the budget. They do have a majority in the legislature, so they can pass it, but they could. The other option is to not pass it and have the contents of that budget become the ballot question. So re-elect us, all these good things in this budget will happen, elect them, and all of this will go away and be put at risk. So I don't think that anybody knows for sure whether or not the budget will be passed, but we know for sure one will be tabled. Just to remind everyone, the government's fiscal year begins on April 1st, but we've certainly had budgets tabled after that date. In fact, in 2017, the provincial budget was tabled on April 27th. Mm-hmm. So about a month into the fiscal year, but the government obviously continues to operate.
And that's not unlike other governments, like the City of Toronto just recently passed its budget, and its fiscal year is the calendar year. So
exactly. So all of that will be leading up to the writ period. And in Ontario, we have legislation on the books that has fixed election dates. The election in Ontario will take place on June the 7th, following tradition, I don't think it's legislated. For some reason that I've never understood, Ontario elections have to be on a Thursday, and federal elections have to be on a Monday. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the way that it is. And we have a writ period that's prescribed in legislation as well.
And that's right. So the writ has to be a minimum of 28 days, and it can be a maximum of 35 days. That writ period is the actual technical election campaign period where the legislature is suspended pending the election outcome and so forth. Certainly, we're seeing all the parties campaigning and presenting their election offerings or getting prepared for their election offerings. But until that writ period takes place, that's the official election campaign.
And that's the period in which the new spending rules take effect as well, where organizations, third-party advertisers have to register. There are limits on what they can and cannot spend. There are returns that have to be filed and so on. So that's the real magic of that date. I think somewhere along the lines too, we will see an NDP platform tabled on their website. To date, the NDP have something that they call a vision document, which is indicative of where I think they want to go, but we haven't seen a platform from them. And then that also takes us to the PC platform, which we're going to talk about, the People's Guarantee, which we all read with considerable interest back in November, which now seems to be on a bit of life support as this leadership process unfolds. Whether or not the integrity of some of that platform will be maintained, we don't know. So look for any last-minute candidates to be added to the PC leadership race today. Look for the legislature to return and the fireworks that will undoubtedly accompany that on Tuesday. Look for the announcement of the PC leader on March the 10th, a provincial budget at some point after that, and then the unveiling of all the party platforms, and then we'll get into the writ period. Of course, parties have the option of unveiling their platform during the writ period.
Yeah, and traditionally the NDP has done that, where they've held on to a platform document until the writ period has actually taken place. So, likely we'll have at least one of those platforms coming out during the actual writ period, although some might be coming out before. Theoretically, the PC platform has come out, but perhaps there might be a revision, People's Guarantee 2.0.
Well, yeah, maybe. Let's talk a little bit about that process then. So we have, as of this moment, 4 candidates that have come forward, put their papers in, and you require a certain number of signatures, you require a certain amount of money that have to be submitted to the party, and so far 4 people have done that. So I think most people are aware that Christine Elliott, former MPP, former PC leadership candidate, is in the race. Everybody knows that Doug Ford is in the race, that Caroline Mulroney is in the race, and perhaps a little lesser known candidate, Tanya Granick-Allen, has put in the paperwork and put in the money and is now officially in the race. Yesterday, February 15th, we watched the first of 2 leadership debates, and we should set the context for this. This is the shortest leadership period
by far
ever. Given where we are in the electoral cycle, that the PCs are really have taken what would ordinarily take 6, 9, 12 months and shortened it considerably because they have to. So we had our first debate last night. We're going to have another one February 28th. It was just announced.
In Ottawa.
In Ottawa, which is great. There may or may not be another candidate at that debate, depending on what happens today at PC Party headquarters.
Well, certainly there's been, I guess, just to get into some of the up-to-the-minute elements, certainly we've heard some rumors that Patrick Brown might emerge again, given that he's trying to clear his name, but there's been a number of different developments around that, which beyond the fact of first potentially that he never resigned, but now audio coming out that he did resign or agreed to resign, and now that, as we said earlier, that there's a statement coming out from Vic Fedeli's office that he's been booted out of the PC caucus. And then as well that there's also been just another press report that came out that apparently he's taken a lie detector test and passed that lie detector test with respect to the allegations against him. Now I will say in legal proceedings now, lie detector tests are not exactly viewed as particularly informative, but certainly all of these certainly go to establishing credibility and determining whether or not he can clear his name in time?
So Brown has remained very front and center in the media and on social media, and I've actually been surprised that as he's been working hard to clear his name and starting to strip away some of the allegations that were made against him the night that he ultimately resigned, there's been a number of people on social media, candidates, nominated candidates, PC party members that are offering expressions of support to Brown as he goes through this period. And you know, politics is all about relationships, and he was leader for a couple of years. And so let's just maybe take a moment to talk about the state of affairs in the PC party, and then we'll come back to the candidates. So Vic Fedeli is named the interim leader. We thought that he would want to run to be the permanent leader, and of course that is not what happened. The party executive called for a leadership process. For the first time that I can remember, none of the candidates to lead the party are members of the caucus, which is unusual and different.
Or at this point, a sitting politician.
That's true. Good point. And Vic Fedeli, shortly after becoming leader, said, I'm not going to run for the permanent leader because I got to spend all my time and energy rooting out the rot in the PC party. And we thought, wow, that's kind of out there, and
it's a fairly bold statement.
Not something you hear every day.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Well, it means that whereas Patrick Brown was talking about the PC party is up to 200,000 members, in pretty short order, Fedeli came out and said actually about 75,000 of those memberships are no good. Still, 120,000 members or so for a provincial party is pretty good.
Nothing to sneeze at.
Right. Now, we know that there's two times when party membership lists swell. One is during the leadership process, and one is during nomination season. You win nominations by going out into the riding, signing up people who support you. They come and vote for you. Some small number of those people tend to stay involved and renew their memberships every year. But let's just say for a second that there are 100,000 or so active PC party members. Most of them would have signed up under Patrick Brown's leadership. And
that's how he won in the first place.
Right. So, you know, while, you know, others, having caucus support is great, but that's not how you win. You win by going out there and signing up thousands of people in all. Remember, too, we're going from 107 ridings to 124.
That's right.
So we have a lot of new boundaries. We will have new MPPs in the legislature. So Fedeli comes out, and then the next thing that happens is the membership, some of them are tainted, and a number of nomination meetings are under question, and 2 at least have been overturned, and they're going to have to do it again.
Now, to be fair, those contested nomination meetings, those predated the Patrick Brown affair.
Sure.
They're just ongoing at this point.
Sure. Point being, though, that there's a suggestion that some untoward things were happening in that party prior to January 25th. We'll call that ground zero. And Fedeli is spending his time getting rid of all of that. So we'll have to see how that plays itself out. I can't imagine it's really good for morale amongst the rank and file of the party, the volunteers, the riding presidents and executives that are they do this because they like politics and they believe in what the party stands for. And to have to deal with this stuff on an ongoing basis is not easy.
Although reports are coming out, and certainly hearing a lot of corroboration on this, that volunteers are surging, memberships are surging, energy is surging in the wake of Ground Zero, as you put it. So potentially this is of the benefit to the party.
Could be.
Could be.
I mean, I think at the end of the leadership process, if whoever wins the leadership is able to unite the party, not unify, I don't know where that word came from, that they should come out of it in pretty good shape. So that's where things are at vis-a-vis the PC party. That's where things are at in terms of the legislative and political calendars. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the PC candidates and the up-to-the-minute news with respect to what else is going on out there. And we're going to talk a little bit about some polling that came out this week after all of this stuff has started. So stay with us, and we'll be right back to you.
For 20 years, Sussex Strategy Group has helped companies and organizations navigate government and bring about successful policy change. Our team of experts understand that it takes more than meetings and phone calls to turn heads and change opinion. It takes insight, strategy, and deep domain knowledge to get things done. In a world that's constantly changing, one thing stays the same. Sussex Strategy Group helps you win. Visit sussex-strategy.com right now and let us help you today. Sussex Strategy Group, 20 years of getting you results.
We hope you enjoyed the commercial. Apparently we have commercials here, and we need commercials because Brian and I are doing this, not only we're doing it live, but there was no money in the budget for hair or makeup. So, you know, this is what it is. We'll see if we can add some more commercials maybe and pay for some of that good stuff. And the catering on this show is terrible too. So, all right, let's get into the candidates. So we've got Doug Ford, Christine Elliott, Caroline Mulroney, and Tanya Granick-Allen. They had their first debate yesterday. We put out a write-up on our website, and if you haven't seen it, sussex-strategy.com on the different candidates, and it was written and put out there before Mrs. Allen joined the race, so no difference.
Granick-Allen.
Granick-Allen, sorry.
As she told Mr. Pagan last night.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, well, he has a hyphenated last name, so he's sensitive to that sort of thing.
That's right.
Some similarities between all of them. As we mentioned earlier, none of them are currently a sitting MPP. Three of them, Mulroney, Elliott, and Ford, have all had family members that held high elected office. We've learned that all of them oppose the carbon tax, oppose the cap and trade system that the Ontario government has put in place, and don't necessarily support what the People's Guarantee said they would do, and we'll talk about that in just a second. They're also, it's a GTA-heavy field, isn't it?
Very much so. Although, as we've discussed before, we also assume that the GTA will really be the deciding ground within the context of this election on June 7th, so perhaps that's not so surprising.
Typically in Ontario leaderships, we might have somebody from the GTA, we might have a candidate from southwestern Ontario, maybe one from the east, possibly someone from the north, but it's a pretty GTA heavy field. So
much so that Tanya Granick-Allen and Christine Elliott are actually looking at potentially running in the same riding. So
that would be fun.
That would be an interesting contest, yes.
So that takes us to how and where are they different? So Caroline Mulroney, was actually nominated as the PC candidate in York Simcoe prior to the Patrick Brown resignation. So as she pointed out during the debate yesterday, she was the only one that was committed to running for the party before all of these problems started. Doug Ford is not nominated, but he's indicated that if he intends to seek the PC nomination in Etobicoke North, which is kind of the Ford part of the city. I looked in the 2014 mayoralty. He won both wards that make up Etobicoke North by 70 and by 67%. So I think he feels pretty comfortable there. Riding currently held by Liberal Shafiq Qadri. Christine Elliott indicated that she's looking for a riding. I think Tanya Granick-Allen is also looking for a riding, and as Brian pointed out, wouldn't it be weird if they both sought the nomination against each other? So that's where we're at. I think Ford, it's safe to say, launched his leadership with an anti-establishment, anti-elite. Make no mistake about it, the elites in this party don't want me to run. And by the way, we've extended an invitation to Doug Ford to be our guest next week, and we have a tentative acceptance. Apparently he's going to be here for this show next Friday, so we'll get to ask him a lot of these questions, and he'll have an opportunity to answer unfiltered directly to the people watching on all of these questions. I think Elliott hit the ground running as experienced, ready, done it before. And
Mulroney, fresh face, energized, people want to change.
Generational change, I think I saw one of her supporters say. And the fourth candidate, Mrs. Granick-Allen, seems to be very concerned about the role of parents in education, seems to be concerned about the sex ed curriculum, and
grassroots.
Pretty clear about that during yesterday's
debate.
So what else came out in the debate? So we know that none of them like the carbon tax. On the minimum wage, I think that three of them, Elliott, Ford, and Granite Allen, all said at $14, it stays at $14. Caroline Mulroney adopted the People's Guarantee position that she would allow it to increase by 25 cents per hour each year. So that second dollar, that $15 an hour that right now the Wynne government has coming into effect January 1st, 2019, would actually take 4 years to get there. Effect. None of them, three of them seem to be pretty consistent on the curriculum. Doug Ford saying the curriculum shouldn't be there to teach what he calls liberal ideology. I think Mrs. Granite Allen is pretty clear on where she's at with it.
She seemed fairly focused on anal sex, particularly. That came up a few times, but
yeah. That's not one we've heard often in leadership debates in the past. And we do, however, have Caroline Mulroney saying that she would not reopen the curriculum. She would leave it alone.
She did agree with the other candidates that it was brought in without sufficient consultation with parents, but she also has acknowledged that it is in place and that she would be leaving it in place.
Yeah, and I mean, we will have somebody from the Liberal side on the show too, but this notion that the government doesn't consult, I mean, you put something out to our clients a week and a half ago. I think you had 29 active consultations that are posted to the regulatory registry, aside from the usual stakeholder ministry work that goes on all the time. So I don't know the extent of it. I mean, if you consult and you don't take the advice of those that maybe step forward, that doesn't mean you didn't consult.
That's true. I mean, I think one of, and Stephen Paikin was quite good at trying to point this part out as well, to sort of call people on that. But perhaps maybe it's the feeling of whether or not they've been adequately consulted, maybe whether or not they were heard, or that were they just going through the motions. And that's certainly a sentiment we've heard sometimes from some of our clients. So maybe that's more what they were getting at, but certainly the consultation piece was one that came up a lot during the debate.
Well, certainly, I mean, it's a big part of what we do here when we take our clients to consult or talk to government and participate in those processes. However, it's not, look, on the development of the curriculum, it's not something that I personally was involved in, but we'll have somebody from the Liberal side that can speak to that and the extent of those consultations. So the carbon tax, the minimum wage, the curriculum, Patrick Brown, whether you like him or not, had done a reasonably good job of kind of putting those socially divisive issues off to the side. Now they're back front and center. They're being talked about at debates. So that takes us to the future of the People's Guarantee.
Well, and you know, we had commented before about this, that for those who maybe aren't following this quite as closely, when the People's Guarantee came out, many commentators said that it could have been written by a Liberal. And I think more of the moderate centrist voters said that approvingly, and more of the social conservatives said that disparagingly.
So when asked by Paikin on the debate, so Granite Allen was pretty clear. Patrick Brown is out, the People's Guarantee is dead. It died when he died. It's a pretty strong statement. I think that Ford came out and he said, I'm not a believer in the 90-page People's Magazine. So I don't think it has a bright future if Ford becomes a leader. There won't be a lot of time for the development of a new platform. I think that of the four, probably Mulroney was the one that adhered to the most, which is not to say she endorses everything in that platform, but she seemed to be the most consistent with it. And Elliott seemed to be, well, I don't love this curriculum. I think we need to revisit it. She didn't say she'd scrap it necessarily. So we're not really sure what the future is of the PC platform. Now, you notice too that none of the candidates went out of their way to attack one another. It's a preferential ballot. So the PC party has a one member, one ballot, one member, one vote balloting system. So unlike other conventions where delegates are elected to represent ridings, so you might have 12 delegates from 100 ridings and ex officios and people of status, in this party, every member gets to vote. And it's a preferential ballot system. Although you vote once, you will be asked, who's your first choice for leader? Who's your second choice for leader? Who's your third choice for leader? And all of these candidates know that. So there's nothing to be gained really by sitting around a table like this and attacking the candidate to your left or to your right, because you're thinking, well, if this person drops off the ballot, I want his or her supporters to come to me. So we noticed maybe a little extra civility in the debate yesterday.
I would say so. They were all, there was also a lot of agreement, generally speaking, as you noted. Carbon tax, minimum wage, sex ed, you know, there were some degrees of difference, perhaps, but most were on the same page.
Yeah, and it seemed to me, I know some of the columnists were expressed disappointment as to the depth and the quality of the policy debate. You know, we do a lot of healthcare work here. I was happy to hear Christine Elliott at least talk a little bit about healthcare ideas that might take effect if she becomes the leader of the party. But, you know, it kind of reminded me at a point where in David Miller's first mayoralty campaign in Toronto, there was a group of candidates, I think there's 7 of them, that operated as a pack. And back then the election was in November. And so if we saw one of the candidates at the food bank, we saw all of them. And if we saw one candidate scrubbing graffiti off of an overpass, these are real examples, this stuff happened, they were all there, and with the media in tow. And then Miller, who really was not leading, he wasn't a front runner, latched onto this island airport issue and ran with it, separated himself from the pack. So I'm wondering, I don't know what that issue might be, but you know, should we expect that one of these candidates will latch onto something, separate themselves from the others, and use it as a path to victory?
For sure. I think Doug Ford perhaps thought the carbon tax was going to be a way that he'd be able to do that. And then, of course, we're now seeing that everyone agreed with him on that front.
Yeah, it's a little actually disappointing if you're into political drama that all of these people are kind of in the same place. Now, preferential ballot. We've seen at the election of federal conservative leader Andrew Scheer. He wasn't first at the beginning, but he was first at the end. Kathleen Wynne was not first on the first ballot, but she was first when it mattered at the end. Even Dalton McGuinty, back in a delegated convention, was 4th and ended up winning the thing. So there is some benefit to being people's second choice in these things. Very quickly, some points of interest. Doug Ford said he would end the subsidy, taxpayer subsidy to political parties. We're going to ask him when he comes here whether or not that means he would allow the limits, which is now $1,200, to increase, given that political parties, look, they're an important part of our democracy, and people may be okay with using some taxpayer money to keep those parties in business. But we'll ask him about that. Amazing, Carolyn Mulroney raised $486,000 in 9 days.
I certainly couldn't do that.
No, in an era where you can't raise corporate money, you can't raise union money, you can't raise association money, it's personal checks, and nobody can give you more than $1,200. She raised $486,000 in 9 days. That's
hundreds and hundreds of people.
Remarkable. Last thing I wanted to touch on in Ford is he ran for mayor, 2014. Now, Toronto, really since the Mike Harris days, has elected Liberals federally and provincially for the most part. Doug Ford got 331,000 votes when he ran for mayor in 2014. He won 20 of 44 wards. He won wards where they only elect Liberals federally and provincially. Is this the opening that the PC party needs to crack Liberal Fortress Toronto?
I don't know about that part, because it looked like they were doing pretty well in starting to crack Fortress Toronto, even as things were trending, and we'll get to that in just a second with the Forum poll that came in recently. But you know, Doug Ford, at the start of the debate last night, he commented about the fact that not only does he attract support from Conservatives, he also attracts support from NDP voters and also from Liberal voters, and that absolutely is true. A lot of people who aren't traditionally PC supporters are amazingly Ford supporters. And that really changes a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the calculations that we've seen with this, in both positive and negative ways, I will note.
Now, coming out of the debate last night, I had the chance to talk to a number of Liberals, and even this morning, and they're actually, they're not discouraged by what they saw yesterday in the PC leaders debate. The feeling amongst most Liberals is that Kathleen Wynne in a debate with Andrea Horwath, the NDP leader, and any one of those PC candidates, that Wynne would do quite well. I'm also reminded that in the last 2 elections, the Liberals trailed in the polls in the lead up, this period, comparable period, and ended up winning them. And I am reminded that Kathleen Wynne is a pretty good campaigner.
That is absolutely true. Given that we've spoken so much as well, though, about the PCs and various controversies around the PCs, trying to be up to the minute as well. For fairness, we should also point out that there is circulating some media today that potentially could upend the Liberals in a significant way if it's true, that there are apparently some allegations within the Liberal caucus. Now, granted, they're against someone who's not part of the caucus currently and they're old, but that there are sexual misconduct allegations that apparently, because this is basically the subject of a tweet at this point, had been brought to the Premier's office attention, but had not been dealt with yet. So we'll see what fallout happens from there.
This is late breaking, and I'm not sure that we have enough yet to talk about it, other than there is an allegation against an unknown person who no longer sits in office. So I'm not sure where we would go with that. But so we had the other day, Forum put out a poll, and maybe we could show the graphic of that poll for our viewers. Now Forum uses IVR, interactive voice response, so your phone rings and you're asked questions by a recorded voice as to your voting intentions, and you press 1 or 2 or 3 depending on what your preferences are. So interestingly enough, while Forum had the Tories kind of stalled out at 38% for some months, that post Patrick Brown's resignation, they actually shot up to 43% in the 416. The Liberals counted in at 33% in Toronto, and the NDP at 19%. 977 voters, that's a pretty good sample size for Toronto.
Yeah, and certainly just in terms of those numbers, as folks saw with the graphic previously, essentially you got the wedge happening where the support came to the PCs essentially by way of the NDP.
Okay, and in that poll, so the Tories lead with 48% of men to 31% for the Liberals. The Tories have the support of 38% of women, 35% of women are Liberal. In the old city of Toronto, they're tied. Big lead for the PCs in what used to be North York. Big lead for the PCs in what used to be Etobicoke. A pretty good lead for the Liberals in Scarborough. So I'm curious, and we'll have to keep an eye on Forum's research, and we may actually have Lauren Bozinoff on one day on this show to see if this is possibly the Doug Ford effect, like what has caused this. For a party that has their leader resigned, their party president resigned, memberships may be tainted, nominations are overturned, all of this stuff, well, who said what, and is this true, and lie detectors, a party in disarray, without a clear front runner. For who will be the next leader, should be taking the lead in the polls, is a little bit confusing.
Confusing.
At least to me. So,
although, again, because that's, we're seeing a lot of people suggesting that this election will effectively be a referendum on the Kathleen Wynne government. And so perhaps, given the fact that the support for the PCs seemed to come from the support of the NDP, the Liberals' support has been holding fairly steady. Again, as the graphic of the polling itself shows, perhaps this is a reflection, much like we saw in the federal election, where it was kind of moving back and forth between the Liberals and the NDP, that when the momentum went to the Liberals, to the Justin Trudeau Liberals, they really surged. And so maybe this is a sense of people saying, okay, this is really, the PCs are the party that would take down the Liberals, and so that's where the support's going.
Could be. We'll know more as we get closer. Last piece on polling, campaign research came out the other day, 1,426 sample size. Across the board, 43% PC, 28% Liberal, 20% NDP. They actually dropped in the names of Christine Elliott, Doug Ford, and Caroline Mulroney Turns out that Christine Elliott actually takes the PC number up to 46%, Mulrooney takes it to 41%, and Ford takes it to 39%. Remember that right now, these candidates are talking to their members. So because the public does not choose the PC leader, only members of the PC party choose that leader, that's who they're messaging towards. So,
should also note that campaign research, I believe it was prior to that poll, had been showing the Liberals and the PCs effectively neck and neck. And I think possibly even the Liberals slightly ahead. So that particular poll shows quite a significant turnaround in terms of the support for each of the for the PCs in the party.
We'll see you next week on Friday. Last word, if you have this, don't throw it out yet, because they have until 5 o'clock today. You never know what could happen in the PC leadership race. Thank you very much for spending some time with us over lunchtime. We'll see you next Friday. Doug Ford will be here. We'll ask him some questions, and you can hear directly from him. We're going to invite other people from the different parties and different leadership candidates, pollsters. Different people will be here every week. So tune in and spend some time with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you.